right. Hi, everyone. Like Ali introduced me, my name is Jean. I'm very happy and excited to be here with you all today. I want to begin our conversation by sharing a little more about my background, so it gives you a better idea of how I got to where my career journey in the energy industry really started when I was deciding on my undergraduate degree. I am an international student from Canada, and prior to living in Canada, I was born and raised in China. My immigrant background ingrained in me the importance of obtaining a quality education and making something of myself. In other words, there were a lot of expectations and very little chill. Under that backdrop, it was borderline acceptable to my family when I decided to study environmental sciences. My parents were satisfied with the prestige of Berkeley, but were not sure what I'll do with a degree in environmental sciences. But hey, at least it has the word science in it, pretty close to engineering. Thanks to my parents' financial support, I had the privilege to study at a prestigious educational institution. That experience encouraged me to think deeply about the impacts which my education can have on the world. Learning about the physical science and social impacts of climate change sparked my interest in seeking interdisciplinary solutions to addressing climate change. Along the way, I met a lot of great mentors. These professors are very passionate about what they study, and they show me the value of applied economics research in designing climate and environmental policy. Around sophomore year, that was the point in my academic career when I was confident enough to tell my parents that the sciences which I aspire to do is actually social sciences, and more specifically, applied economics. The first reaction was extreme puzzlement because how is economics even related to environmental sciences? Their second question, which frankly I am still exploring to date, is how am I ever going to find a job as an international student who is passionate about climate change and is specializing in energy economics? Luckily, I believed in myself, and hence I have some stories and experiences to share with you all about seeking internship and career opportunities in the energy industry. The first piece of advice I have is starting on a topic or issue which motivates you to action and start working on it. Throughout my time at UC Berkeley, two student organizations. One of them accomplished the mission of implementing recycling and composting in the residence halls, and the other one advocated for on-campus solar energy generation. I am very proud of what I accomplished, but guess where these projects started? The recycling project actually started with me handing out paper bags to each dorm room of my residence hall and collecting plastic bottles weekly to divert them from landfill waste. Throughout this process, I recruited a couple of my floormates to help me, and we collected data on the demand for recycling and created awareness, which eventually urged the administration to implement a holistic recycling program. Start small and then build these strong and mutually beneficial relationships with your peers and your community so you can leverage these relationships to accomplish your goals. On the note of relationship building and its importance to career success, I want to comment on why networking is essential and the role it played in my career. To me, networking provides opportunities to absorb new knowledge from subject and industry experts, and to communicate my passions with the goal of forming relationships. Think about the 2-minute elevator pitch, which a lot of us are familiar with. What is the point of doing it anyways? In addition to providing a positive first impression, it also helps us reflect and synthesize our story, a story which connects us to people who share our professional goals, or it can help us broaden our perspective on what our career path could look like. I put this in practice when looking for my first internship in the energy field in Washington, D.C. During my sophomore year in college, I applied to a program called Cal in the Capital, where the goal is to find a summer internship related to public service and policy. At that time, I was interested in renewable energy, So the obvious opportunities were think tanks and research centers. However, those opportunities were extremely competitive, and I could not get a foot in the door. As I got closer to June, I felt like I was hitting a wall on my internship search, and I started to doubt myself. I am sure that this is a commonly shared feeling among all of us here, but at that time, it seemed like an unconquerable barrier to me. What made a difference was that I did not give up and I reached out for help. From taking the climate and energy policy class that semester, MTA, Jane Flagle worked on energy policy in DC prior to pursuing her PhD at UC Berkeley. So I reached out to her and talked to her about my concern. She not only connected me to a alumnus who did the same program as mine, but she also recommended other internship opportunities which I could apply to. That was the silver lining in my doomsday situation. And the next thing I know, I was having lunch with Aaron, the student who Jane mentioned, in DC talking about each other's interests in energy industry. I worked at the Solar Energy Industry Association, which is a trade group for solar energy in the United States, and they do a lot of lobbying efforts at the federal level. I was living 4 blocks away from the White House. It was the summer which I had always dreamed of, and I made the best out of it because I knew that networking and relationship building are the key to getting the support I needed when things were tough on my career journey. As much as networking is about displaying your accomplishment, it's much more about receiving guidance from others who had walked that path before. After my internship experience in DC, I applied the knowledge I gained about the solar industry to my senior thesis. During my data collection process, I came across this nonprofit organization called California Independent System Operator, CAISO. For those of you who are not familiar with the CAISO, it is responsible for operating the electric transmission system and the wholesale electricity market. For my research, I collected wholesale electricity prices and compared them to the power purchase contract prices of solar electricity in order to quantify the societal benefits of rooftop solar. While I experienced the joy of applying microeconomic analyses to evaluate renewable energy technologies, I became curious about the CAISO and its role as the operator of California's increasingly renewable electric grid. So I went back to the drawing board and did what I do best, start small. I began reading about the CAISO's formation after the electricity crisis in California in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and learned about the deregulation of what used to be vertically integrated investor-owned utilities companies to what the versions look like today of PG&E, SoCal Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric companies. I was fascinated by the formation of the nodal wholesale electricity market because it was the combination of microeconomic principles of supply and demand and the physics of the electric grid. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. My nerdiness needed an outlet, and talking to my professors at Berkeley was not enough. When I found out that the CAISO was going to be at the internship fair, I polished up my resume and elevator pitch and went to their booth. I still remember the recruiter whom I talked to that day. Upon soaking up my enthusiasm and interest, he asked me if I know anything about Folsom, which is where the CAISO is located. My answer was, I don't know much about that city besides that there's a prison there. I had no idea then that I would live and work in Folsom for 2 years, and am fortunate to call CAISO the launch pad of my career. All of this was so unexpected that when the recruiter Adam called me to offer the internship, I forgot to ask if they were going to pay me. I just took the offer, moved to Folsom, and knew that I was going to be at the center of a lot of policymaking around renewable energy integration and electricity market. At the CAISO, I worked on interconnecting utility-scale renewable projects such as wind, solar, battery storage to the grid. My role is best described as a project manager who coordinates the interconnection process among project developers, utility companies, and the CAISO. I leveraged and improved on my teamwork, time management, and communication skills, ensuring smooth processing of interconnection applications. During the 2 years, I benefited enormously from the leadership of my director, Debbie Levine. who have been working in the energy industry for more than 30 years and was one of the few female electrical engineers of her time. She taught me the importance of advocating for myself as a young professional, and she helped me gain as much knowledge and experiences as I could. The more I immersed myself in the energy industry, the broader and deeper my network became. And it all started with something small. Now I'm talking to you today as a graduate student in the Energy Systems program here at UC Davis. I decided to take the knowledge I learned about our electric system and apply it to the transportation sector as California decarbonizes its transportation. Whenever I meet with my research advisor, Dr. Alan Jen, I always tell him how I am drinking from the fire hose when it comes to topics related to transportation and electric vehicles. But that is exactly where I want to be right now, soaking up new knowledge, forming connections, and continuing to explore my career path. To sum up my experiences and lessons learned, I would say first, find something which interests you and start small. The time you spent learning knowledge and getting good at something will never be wasted. Second, reach out and build relationships because they will support you through difficult times in your career. Third, take risks and take chances with new opportunities. I didn't know I would enjoy Folsom, but now Sacramento is my home, and I could not be happier with how my life turned out so far. I really appreciate this opportunity to meet with you all. Thank you for your attention today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Hi, everybody. Yeah. I'm Nick. As Ali mentioned, I work with CalCCA, the Trade Association for the State's Community Choice Aggregators. In contrast to Jean's extremely polished and prepared presentation, this is maybe going to feel a little bit more off the cuff. But kudos to Jean. That was a really fascinating discussion, and I think you're selling yourself short when you say you're still trying to figure out where those career opportunities are going to be. I think you're going to find your demand will be skyrocketing as an energy economics graduate from Davis. So really thank you for that, Jean. That was really, really awesome to hear. All right, so let's dive into my internship and career background. I thought it might be helpful if I just show folks a slide here that orients a little bit on my trajectory. As you can tell by my receding hairline, I'm not a sort of immediate college to graduate school type. I spent about 5 or 6 years between graduating from UC Davis as an undergrad in economics back in 2010, and then coming back to get my graduate degree in 2016, also at UC Davis. Just can't get enough of the cow smell. And in between that time, mostly focused on energy and climate policy with a specific focus on electric utility regulation, and that's something I've continued since. But since we're talking today a lot about internships, I thought I'd share about some of my internship stops that are actually, unfortunately, not listed on my career timeline, but things that I did in college that were helpful. So my first internship in college was with a brokerage firm that worked with oil tankers, essentially transacting and scheduling and chartering oil transactions throughout the world as a brokerage firm in New York City. And that was a really interesting and enlightening way to see sort of how what you might think of as the sort of Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, Big Short style trading desk firms work, which is not the direction my career took. And I'm a little thankful for that because that can be a little bit hectic. But it was really interesting to see sort of what is the transactional underpinnings of the oil industry. I went in as a 19-year-old for a 1-month summer internship. And I'll tell you, I could not have been more overwhelmed and underprepared. But I think that, like any of you seeking internships, I was thrilled for the opportunity. The company was thrilled to have me there as someone who was eager to learn and ready to go after these projects. But I just want to make sure that none of you feel like that imposter syndrome or that constantly underwater feeling you might have going into a new industry or a new internship. Everybody starts somewhere, and I want everybody to know that you shouldn't let that daunting feeling hold you back from applying and doing the outreach like Jean mentioned. My second college internship, I actually took a semester off and I moved to New York City where my family had relocated to, and I worked at a financial firm that focused on ETFs, exchange traded funds, which was at that time, a sort of novel mutual fund type investment product. And again, I was so overwhelmed and underprepared for that. But I essentially was the intern for the sort of administrative office team, helping them prepare for a big office relocation. They had about in New York, they were expanding to a bigger space. And I got sort of lent out to different departments to help them with special projects. Sometimes it meant, stapling booklets together. Sometimes it meant just listening in on projects, but often I was, sort of sent off to figure out the logistics of an office move. Very distinct from my sort of economic focus, but for a sophomore in college, it was a really enlightening way to get in and sort of see what things look like on the inside of a sort of business operation. So moving on from there, my career started to target a little bit more towards environment, which had sort of long been my interest and focus. As I got deeper into my economics degree, I was also doing a writing minor, which was at that time a very new minor degree you could get at UC. Sort of take the UWP courses and add a couple extra, and you can get a minor tacked on. But part of that required me to do a 1-quarter internship. And I had been lucky enough, I had worked as an SAT tutor throughout college, and one of my students, her dad was a longtime Capitol staffer and had worked in the healthcare industry in Sacramento. And we connected, and he set me up. He basically took me around to different legislative offices and tried to help me get that internship, unpaid internship. And as you can imagine, particularly, this probably predates some of you young people, but back in 2008, 2009, California was in an extreme budget hole, not unlike the one we're entering into now with the COVID recession. And so legislative offices were very eager to have unpaid labor join them to help work on different policy and political issues. So that's where I really got my first taste of policy making. I'll say throughout college, I had a lot of interest in public policy and the environment, but I really didn't understand how public policy works. I had this sort of overwhelming sense of doom and hopelessness about solving policy issues. And I actually got into the state capitol. That's when I confirmed that all the doom and gloom was merited. No, I'm kidding. That's when I found that there were actually people who were working on these issues and actually advancing very significant climate policies, particularly in California. That was when the cap and trade program was being launched. It was the early days of things like the zero emissions vehicles and low carbon fuel standard program. The renewable portfolio standard was being expanded into a more serious program around 2010. There was a lot of activity in that era that was starting to advance California's cadre of environmental policies. So the big sort of internship, and I hesitate to say internship, but the big sort of transitional career moment for me, perhaps similar to Jean's experience at CAISO, was being accepted into a fellowship program in the Capitol. So I applied to join the Capitol Fellowship program, into the Assembly Fellowship program. And in the Assembly Fellowship, for those of you who don't know, the Assembly is what we call the sort of Congress of California, our lower house of our state legislature. You're basically placed as a legislative staffer for a year into an office where you help an assembly person basically analyze bills, develop bills, participate in committee hearings, work with constituents, and all the stuff that a normal leg aide would do. Sort of think like West Wing, but like less sexy or sophisticated, like the sort of lame state legislature version. Although it is fairly sophisticated, it's not quite West Wing. Somewhere between like West Wing, House of Cards, and Veep is where the reality is, and that's probably true for Washington as well. But I was really, really fortunate to have that experience and be in the position as a young person of really getting a exposure to how government works, how policymakers interact with each other, with the public, with stakeholder groups. I got to meet lobbyists, and I don't just mean dark, holding bags of money in the alley lobbyists. I met with lobbyists from lots of environmental advocacy groups, community groups, lobbyists representing the University of California, representing local governments, representing utilities, other types of organizations. And I think some experience at CAISO, this is really what I consider my launch pad into a career in public policy, where I really was fortunate to learn about the inner workings of how has developed, how the sort of political overlay on policy coexists with the policymaking process, where we can and can't make progress as a society on some of our collective problems like the climate challenge. And it was really, I would say, foundational for to have that experience. And I was very fortunate to spend another year at continuing to work in that same assembly office until the member that I worked for termed out in 2012. So I'll jump ahead a little bit. I will just note that after that, I did work for Southern California Edison, the electric utility, for a few years as a lobbyist. My job was primarily on policy analysis, a lot of time working internally with our teams to understand public policy proposals coming out of the legislature, worked with the bill authors and committee consultants to refine bills that were coming out that impacted the electric utilities. And it was an exciting time where the electric utilities are one of the very few corporate players that is meaningfully advancing climate policy in California and really globally. And so it was really exciting to be part of that movement, to not just push against policy development, but actually help shape policy development for the better. So jumping ahead, I went to and as I was getting my master's degree in energy systems, and I was actually coming to the end of my 2 years in the energy systems degree, preparing to graduate, I had this crazy notion that I would get an ag econ degree as well. I think, Gene, you may be doing that as well. And I was about halfway through that program, needed a few more fall courses. So over the summer, I was fortunate enough to take an internship at Energy and Environmental Economics, also known as E3, the consulting firm in SF. And I'll share maybe just a quick anecdote on how that. I think, like many of you, constantly receive invites to attend ITS events, energy events, basically opportunities to network with the people from companies and government who work with ITS and the Energy Efficiency Institute. And I didn't attend all of them. I really tried to make an effort to make as many as I could. And at one of those events, I ended up meeting one of the partners from E3. And when I say meeting, I knew who she was because I think she'd been on a panel, or I recognized her. And I went up and I said, I introduced myself and I said, hey, I'd love to talk more and learn about what you do. And she was thrilled with that interest. And we ended up having dinner together along with another energy program student, Zane McDonald, who was in around my class. And it was really as simple as that. I think a lot of us feel like that introduction moment is so scary, and that the person we're trying to reach out to is so powerful and important that they don't have time for us. So I think really in almost any setting, it's the opposite. Folks are thrilled when you show an interest and want to reach out to them and want to learn about what they do. And I would just encourage all of you to remember that when you want to meet someone new, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be thrilled that you're excited to meet them. So take the initiative to just say hello, introduce yourself, and have that conversation. So at E3, I spent a summer internship there. That was at a very different type of organization that I worked at previously, focused on quantitative consulting, although I did some qualitative consulting work for them as well, policy focused. But I did a mix of quantitative analysis of building electrification and qualitative research on building electrification, as well as some research on electricity deregulation in California. Fantastic experience. And what has just amazed me the most coming out of E3 is that people feel like because I spent a summer at E3 and I have a master's degree, that I'm like I can point my fingers at a computer and make it do machine learning. Like there's just this idea that I've become this wizard of programming. And I can program okay, but I think I just want to just flag the importance of signaling effects of career stops on a resume. That has fundamentally changed, I think, the perception of me from a policy know-nothing lobbyist to someone who now can hash it out with the best of them on market design, which I'm certainly not qualified for, but now increasingly seem to find myself in those conversations. So I'll just note, if you have those opportunities to flesh out a skill that you don't necessarily have, and I'll just briefly share this slide here before we switch gears, because I think I'm probably eating up more time than I'm allotted. One of the pieces of advice I shared with the ed class is that you really need to think of your career potential as a combination of hard skills and soft skills. If you're really good on soft skills, take a summer and do an internship that builds up your hard skills. If you're really strong on hard skills, take a summer and do an internship that builds your soft skills, because your success in your career cannot be built on either of these in the absence of the other.
My name's Mekdom. I'm honored to be here, first of all. I feel I would not have guessed that I would be on a panel about career success, a few months after starting my, I would say, well, I guess it's almost been a year now. It's almost a year since I graduated. But yeah, and very happy that you invited me, Ali. And so I graduated in 2019 from UC Davis with my master's in business. And yes, there we go. Okay, so first of all, I would say my career started with my family history of both my parents coming to the U.S. from Ethiopia, which obviously defined first and foremost. Being in the U.S. was a very fortunate thing for me. I was actually born in Connecticut, but when I was about 2, my family moved to California, and I've been here ever since. So these are all the places I've ever lived in the last 24 years. Started out in the South Bay area, and then moved down to Salinas for high school, went to college down in San Luis Obispo, moved up here originally for a job to the Davis area, and then enrolled in grad school, and now am living in West Sacramento. So taking a step back, I went to school Cal San Obispo. I majored in environmental engineering. I was not what most people would call a great student. I really didn't care much about my grades, and probably spent more time running around these hills than I did studying. But I also quickly learned that, my experiences outside of a classroom were way more valuable than my experiences inside one. And that's the theme of this webinar really well, in terms of leveraging internships and different career experiences to advance. I think Cal Poly really stresses a learn by doing philosophy, and so I always look for opportunities to do that, whether I was through student clubs or research projects or different internships and jobs. I was always very busy outside of the classroom in my entire 4 years there, and I think that has whatever success I have had in my career thus far. So this is a photo from my first summer job after my freshman year. I was as a zero waste assistant with Recology, which is a garbage hauling company, and actually an all-around waste management company. And this was in San Benito County. So I was a zero, on my resume, it highlights the really cool, kind of impressive parts of that job, which was, working a lot with businesses in the community, making sure that they have everything they need. It's largely an educational job. We're trying to boost the recycling rate in the city, as well as verifying compliance with a lot of local regulations and recycling requirements. And that's all great, but it was actually extremely not glamorous. San Benito County in the summer is regularly over 100 degrees. And my job was basically to drive around the county in the heat looking through garbage. And that was my busy life for 3 months. But at the same time, I also got paid to drive around and look through garbage, which was essentially dumpster diving. And I found a lot of really cool things. People throw away incredible things. I found a lot of art, interestingly. I found a really cool, really nice, actually, leather recliner that I kept for years. One time I was outside of a cell phone store and found a box full of brand new chargers. And I actually, yeah, one time I was outside of some sort of biomedical facility. I don't obviously know what it was, and there was a box of some miscellaneous unlabeled drugs, and just like all kinds of weird things. And this picture here is actually from my last day on the job, working at the Gilroy Garlic Festival. And so my boss and I together, our job was to sort through all the garbage from the entire event before loading it into the trucks that would haul it away to make sure no contamination got into the compost. And that would be a disgusting job at any event, but this just happened to be the Gilroy Garlic Festival, and so everything was just soaked in garlic. And it was pretty intense, but very gratifying at the end of the day, and quite a way to cap off my summer internship there. So then the 2 summers later, actually the next summer I did not take an internship, but the summer after that, after my junior year, I stumbled into this role with WorldCentric pretty serendipitously, if that's the right word. It was over spring break of my junior year. I left town for a camping trip, and there was this composting symposium happening on campus that, I had decided to miss and opted to go camping instead, and fully expected to not attend. But I actually got back from the trip like half a day earlier than I expected, and it was the last day of the symposium. All the programming was pretty much over, and they had just like a little banquet at the end of the week with like food, and people would just kind of schmooze and stuff. And so I thought, what the heck, I would go, and I literally I didn't even go home after coming back from camping. I just went straight to the banquet, and I was wearing like, I think cut off jean shorts and like a t-shirt, and was super dirty from hiking or whatever. And thought worst case scenario, I'd get some free food and just leave. But I ended up meeting this woman who happened to be working as a consultant for WorldCentric, and we just started chatting. And she mentioned, is my internet connection unstable? I'm just going to keep going. She mentioned that they were looking for a grad student researcher to take on a project for them. But after learning that my background in waste and composting, and I was also the president of the Zero Waste Club at the time on campus, she kind of just, I guess we together created a job for me kind of right there on the spot. And what I ended up doing for them that summer, a feasibility assessment for a food waste diversion program over the at the Cal Poly campus, and it was essentially a research project, and sort of like half a research project. I wrote this big 40-50 page report, and also used my connections across campus, being involved with all these clubs and things, to sort of facilitate that partnership between WorldCentric and Cal Poly. And before I sort of end that story, I want to take a step back and mention that through this job, I got my first big lesson in negotiating my pay. And Jean, I think, touched on a similar thing of just like when you're first starting out in your career and you don't really know what you're worth, or you don't even really know to ask for what you deserve. Because when they offered me the job, they asked me how much. They just straight up asked me, how much do I want to be paid for the whole project? It was sort of a flat fee, and I had no reference point, no idea what was even close to the right figure, and I ended up super low myself, and it was such a low number that at one point the CEO asked me to come to his office and tried to offer me more money, and I actually declined. And I don't know, I can't like say definitively what I was thinking in that moment, but in retrospect, I realized that I just super underestimated what I was capable of and what I was worth. And I think maybe also didn't want the additional pressure that that money came with, because I honestly had no idea what I was doing going into that job, and was kind of just making it up as I went and learning as I went. But I ended up doing a really good job and writing a great report that I was able to hand off to the campus sustainability team that they then used in the following year to implement the program, largely using a lot of my recommendations and things and data. And I definitely learned a lesson, but I'm still probably terrible. I would say I am still terrible at negotiating my pay, and probably undersold myself at every negotiation I've ever had since then. But gradually improving and always remembering that lesson. So that was that summer, and by that point, I had kind of developed a resume largely focused on waste, solid waste management, and everybody else in my program, in the environmental engineering program, was focusing on water and wastewater treatment and air quality, and I was literally the only one in my entire class who was really focused on trash. So naturally, I got pretty chummy with the one professor who taught the solid waste classes, and as a result, he recommended me for an internship at the SLO County Integrated Waste Management Authority, and I ended up working there for a year as a recycling specialist during my most of my senior year. And one achievement I'm super proud of from my time in that role was I actually helped to write the grant proposal that was submitted to the state for this anaerobic digestion facility that's shown here in this picture. And they ended up winning that grant and getting the facility built. I think it was started operating in early 2019. So I wasn't there when it really took off, but I feel like I contributed to that, and so I'm super proud of that.
Hey, Metim, just real quick. So if we could try to wrap it up in a couple minutes, that would be great. Just so we have a few minutes at the end for some questions, that would be awesome.
Totally. Yeah, so I graduated, got a job, do more garbage. I was working as a consultant to city governments and county governments and municipalities on solid waste and recycling issues. Fun fact about waste, big city garbage hauling in the mid-1900s was largely run by mafias, and stayed that way for a long time. And even now, some cities are still, there's a lot of mob involvement in garbage hauling. So I had no idea until getting to work behind the scenes in a lot of that stuff and hearing those stories. So then I went back to Davis to get my master's I enrolled in the business program. My approach to learning here was largely the same as at Cal Poly, focused on learn by doing opportunities, including getting involved with the Energy and Efficiency Institute and the Emerging Energy Professionals program, which I think everyone here is a part of. And so that was super valuable. And over those 2 years, had a lot of other internships and consulting projects. And these are some of the organizations I got to work with. I'm going to skip through the details there, but largely just the point being I wanted to broaden beyond waste. I was feeling pretty pigeonholed in the waste industry, and so wanted to do more with energy and climate, and these internships largely accomplished that and played a huge role in landing my current job, which is sustainability consultant at Anthesis Group. And I'm on the analytics team there, working with a lot of large corporations on their sustainability work and climate action and things like that. So super happy at my current job. And yeah, tips, lessons learned. Find your mentors. There's, people who are there to support and guide you and help you succeed. It's super important. don't hesitate to ask questions. I think, Nick touched on that imposter syndrome and not wanting to sound dumb, but really everyone knows that, when you're first starting off, you know very little, just like they did, and they all want to help you. So if you don't know something, ask. Be your genuine self. Yeah, I think that's something I've learned to do. Again, just really finding my confidence in who I am and not having to pretend like I'm something else is super valuable to me. Treat people well. Look for opportunities to challenge yourself in your internships. It might be easy in some jobs to just kind of get comfortable and do like low-level intern work. But if you find an opportunity to do something to challenge yourself, I recommend you always take it. If you make a mistake, just admit it and try to correct it. Everyone makes mistakes. Try to whatever part of the organization you have a hand in, try to leave behind something valuable. Try to create something or build something or improve something that stays after you leave, and that'll leave a great lasting impression. And then lastly, express appreciation when you're leaving to everyone, but especially those mentors that I mentioned. A small gift or a card can be a really nice gesture. And hopefully, everyone is sad to see you go. I think that's sad, but also a good thing, a good indication that you did a good job. And that is all. Thanks.
I'll start first if that's okay. So I'm Chris.
Great.
For those who I haven't met, as far as my plans for the summer, I'll be interning with the CalCCA, and I'll be working as a power systems engineering intern. I do have a question. The point about knowing your worth as far as negotiating your salary was raised. And I know this is probably a point to consider for when we go into our careers, but how do you actually assess that, and what metrics would you consider in going through that kind of negotiation?
Great question. All right, who's got some advice for Kristen?
I can offer something. Just try to do as much homework as you can beforehand. Glassdoor is a good resource. Sometimes you can find some pretty good data there on average pay for certain types of jobs and certain types of places. If you know anyone who works at the organization, like personally, that you feel comfortable asking, that can also be a good resource for that. But largely, it's just hard. It's hard for anyone first starting out, I would say, and kind of just learn over time.
Nick or Jean, any advice on that front?
I think the reality is that employees are always fairly disadvantaged in this, and the information asymmetry here. I think Mektam's advice is really good. If you're considering working in the public sector, you can actually find prices. I think trying to benchmark yourself is a really important exercise, a difficult exercise. But if you can't find near benchmarks, also look at like what are folks making coming out of your graduate program, like your degree more generally. You can usually find aggregated statistics a little bit more easily, things like that. And also make sure to consider things like location. A lot of folks coming out of Davis might be comparing jobs in San Francisco versus Sacramento. So it's really important to think about location. What are the expectations? Is it a job that's going to expect you to be on call all the time versus something that's going to be 9 to 5 versus something that's going to be flexible? I think about all those characteristics as well as you're going through the process.
So my name's Maya, and I'm an economics and environmental policy double major. So my questions kind of might apply more to Nick and Jean, but Jean, you talked a bit about really finding the intersection between economics and applying that to the energy field. And then Nick, you talked a lot about how you got started in policy. So I wonder if you could each share like a bit of advice or a skill that you think is really important to get into this field. Yeah, just something like that.
Yeah, I can definitely comment on that. I think one skill which is really important in this case is data analysis. It sort of relates to Nick's presentation about the hard skills. That's something which I sort of resisted in getting good at when I was in college. I was trying to get away with as little coding as possible. But I realized, at some point I really gotta sit myself down in front of a computer and, learn R and learn to not use Excel for everything. So that was definitely like a good realization for me to pick up when I was in school. So that way I could take classes and I could really practice these skills and continue to get good at it in grad school right now. So that's a really important hard skill.
I would strongly echo Jean's comment about getting into programming and data analysis. It is amazing how few people have those skills in the workforce. That's changing as more and more grads come out with programming, but if you come out with data analysis skills, you'll be super valuable. One other element I would suggest is as you're selecting your econ courses, I would really suggest erring on the side of microeconomics as a focus. I think that tends to be much more valuable in the workforce. The macro stuff is interesting, but unless you're going on an academic path or a sort of federal government path, micro is really where most of the sort of industry focus is. And then my final comment is intuition is critical. So data analysis is important, but intuition can usually get you 80 to 90% of the way there. And I see a lot of folks coming more out of grad school, but I'm sure this is applicable for undergrads as well, who come out with really strong data skills, but don't have good intuition and analysis. And so that can be a real limiting factor because when you get out into the workforce, you're going to have to be doing your own project design, analysis, intuition. You have to go start to finish, right? You're not just going to get handed off a chunk of data analysis from a professor most of the time. So try to build those skills. And when I say build those skills, I'm talking about find courses where you can do group projects, where you can do presentations, where you have some sort of qualitative analysis built on top of the quantitative skills.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Programming, R. R and R will take you places.
I remember R. All right, other questions out there?
Yeah, hi, my name is Lamia. I don't think I am in your guys' program. I just kind of like found this link off of an email that I was sent.
You're welcome. You're totally welcome. You don't have to be part of the group. We'd love to have you, but you are welcome no matter what.
Thank you. I kind of have a question that I think mostly applies to MECDM because I saw that you kind of like transferred from working with garbage and waste management into electric and mostly like electric energy type work, if I'm correct. Pay attention. Like how did you find that transition? Like I'm assuming that it wasn't like really easy or not, but did you have to like prepare more? Were you able to kind of like go into your jobs and have kind of like a support network that would help you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was largely thanks to my involvement in a lot of the programming at the Energy and Efficiency Institute, both in terms of getting those jobs and also supporting me and providing me with the just like foundational knowledge to be able to get in there and then kind of learn as I go once I was in the job. So yeah, I mean, I definitely had a lot of support, but yeah, I was definitely outside of my comfort zone too, and I think that was one of my tips, like try to look for those opportunities to like push yourself outside of your comfort zone, and don't be afraid to take something on that you might not be like qualified for, right?
Okay.
Thank you. Ramya, are you at UC Davis? Are you a student at UC Davis?
Yeah, I am. I'm currently a biochem major. I'm an undergrad. Oh. Yeah.
I can send you an email about the EAP program, which is the Emerging Energy Professionals Program. So that's what some of these students that are joining us today are a part of. And we always are accepting folks. We're starting another round of the program in September. So you'd be welcome to, to apply and be part of that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like that.
Okay, I will find you on
Cool, thank you.
if I can add one comment in addition to Mekdom on this one, I think for folks who are undergrads, especially on this meeting, graduate school is a great way to reinvent yourself. If you get out of undergrad and spend a few years and you want to pivot industries or pivot functions, go to grad school for a year or two and you can do whatever you want to do when you come out. So the world is your oyster on the other side.
That's a great point.